This conference will now be recorded.
Very good evening to one and all present here. I'm Ms. Neha Mahajan, Executive Organizer on behalf of Biosetup Lifesciences. Take this honor to welcome our founder coordinator, RKD Das, sir, event coordinator, Dr. Kavita Paul, Dr. Pilani Campus, Mrs. Somjit Bhargavi, and our today's eminent guest speaker, Dr. Rita Sharma. Faculty members, organizers, and all my dear student participants, I welcome you all for the webinar on the topic Writing Your First Manuscript, organized by Biosetup Lifesciences. I hope you all are good and safe at your end. Before starting the session, a humble request to all the participants, please do not share your audio, video, or screen sharing in order to avoid any kind of disturbance. If you have any doubt during the session, please use the chat box. Certificates will be provided to the registered participants only after filling of the feedback form. Now let me tell you about Biosetup Life Sciences. Biosetup Life Sciences is a hub of scientific research and learning approved by ISO 9001:2015 certified organization and also MSME registered under Government of India. We have multidisciplinary team of eminent and experienced faculty members and research associates that provide support to aspiring students in life sciences. We have successfully organized many webinars, workshops, internship programs, e-training programs, certification courses, career counseling, competitive exam preparations, that is CSIR, IIT-JAM, GAT-B, IISc, and DBT. We are continuously working for the career improvement of students. As we all are aware, have been facing difficult times during the ongoing pandemic since 2 years, but we believe in not stopping and giving quality education to the budding minds through the online platform. You must have also heard that empty rake makes more noise, so it's important to keep filling the bucket of knowledge through any source available. Keeping this in mind, now would like to introduce our event coordinator, Dr. Sudeep Das, Dr. Sudeep Das, Dr. Kavita Pal, Dr. Arpana Sharma, Dr. Ritu Chandel, Mrs. Somaji Bhargavi. Dr. Arpana Sharma, she is a cancer biologist. She is MPhil PhD in Life Sciences and currently working as a faculty member of Biosetup Life Sciences. Mrs. Somaji Bhargavi ma'am, she is MSc PhD in microbiology, GAT-T-set qualified, working as a faculty member of Biosetup Life Sciences. Dr. Sudeep Das is a lung infection biologist, human microbiome expert, postdoctoral fellow, University of Lausanne, Switzerland. He is also a science scholar, DAD fellow, and DFG career development fellow, and currently holder of highly prestigious Marie Curie fellowship from the European Union. Dr. Kavita Paul, she is a scientist at Advanced Center for Treatment, Research and Cancer, Tata Memorial Center, Mumbai, India. Dr. Ritu Chandel, she is MBBS MD in biochemistry, as well as a renowned speaker, tutor, and currently working with Bridge Candy Hospital Trust, Mumbai, Maharashtra. Karanjit Kaur, can you please mute yourself? It is causing disturbance. Last but not the least, now I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Rita Sharma. Dr. Rita Sharma pursued her PhD in plant molecular biology from University of Delhi, South Campus. Ma'am has worked at University of California, Davis as postdoctoral fellow, currently working as an associate professor at Department of Biological Sciences, BITS Pilani, Rajasthan. Her field of specialization is plant biotechnology, omics technology that includes genomics, transproteomics, metabolic and phylogenomics, functional genomics, transgenics, computational biology, and genome engineering and editing. Dr. Sharma has also worked as an assistant professor at School of Computational and Integrative Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Ma'am was also selected for an overseas fellowship under Genome Engineering Editing Technology. Ma'am is also a recipient of prestigious Ramalingan Swamy Re-entry Fellowship from DBT, Government of India. Ma'am has published more than 50 research and review articles in some of highly reputed journals including Nature, Nature Biotech, Panache, Plant Journal, Nature Plant, and almost has 4,000 citations. She has been actively engaged in sharing tips for manuscript writing with budding researchers at different forums. It's a privilege to have you, ma'am, here on this platform today. Now I request ma'am to kindly proceed. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you. Over to you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, I had to leave and rejoin because of some technical problem, but I think my screen is not shared right now. Is it shared?
No, no, ma'am. Only your video is on. Screen is
Right.
not shared.
So let me just try once again. That option is not coming up. Yeah, you need to make me presenter again, it seems. Can you please check the settings?
Yeah, ma'am. Just a
Mhm.
Ma'am, I am not able to find your name. Like, by what name you have joined?
It should be
Dr.
Rita
Rita
Sharma.
Sharma? Rita.
It
Okay.
should be just
Karan
Rita
Kumar,
Sharma.
Abunami, please do not put on your video. Please do not put on your video. No, ma'am. Still, your name is not visible to me.
It is possible that it might be default showing something else. Let me just say, I'm going to edit my name. I'll just say
Yes, yes.
Dr. Rita Sharma, so that it's easier for you. I just renamed
Okay,
myself
okay.
as Doctor. Yeah. Yes, perfect.
Yes, ma'am.
I believe
Anbumani,
now,
please put off your video. Please put off your video. Participants, please do not unmute yourself. Do not share your audio video. It is causing disturbance. Otherwise, I have to remove you from the session. Kindly do the needful and cooperate.
okay, so I hope now my slides are visible and I'm clearly audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, so I think we can finally start now. So a little bit of technical glitch, but I think it's okay. So I think I've already been introduced while I was trying to log in over again. So I'll come straight away to topic. And before that, I would like to thank you, the Biosetup team, for organizing this and inviting me and to give me opportunity to interact with you all. And thank you all for taking time on a Saturday evening to learn about manuscript writing. So I'm happy that to see a lot of students participating for that. So coming to manuscript writing, the first question that should be very clear to you all is that why you should even care about manuscript writing. I'm sure most of you already understand, and that's why you are here. But just to give you a little bit more idea about what manuscripts do to your career and as a researcher, when we say we are doing science, science starts with making observations, right? Which leads to questions that you further use to make your hypothesis, and that needs to be validated using experimentation. You analyze the data, and finally you draw your conclusions on a particular aspect. And all this science that you do in the laboratory takes a lot of investment in terms of money, in terms of your valuable time, in terms of the effort that you put in, and it requires a lot of coordination among people from same or different fields. So it is extremely important that after you have invested a lot of money, time, and effort, it is important that you share these results with others in the community so that they don't repeat the same thing, or may be able to take this a step further and to the next step rather than doing the same thing all over again. And as far as your personal career is growth is concerned, whether it is with the award of the PhD degree or a job application or award or fellowships that you apply for, you try to apply for grants from the funding agencies or getting recognition in the field as a scholar, you need publications. And in fact, even your organizations where you work, the institutes and universities, if you are familiar with these frameworks where the institutes are ranked based on several factors, publication is one very important factor. And in fact, your nation is also assessed based on the scientific output. So it is extremely important to publish for your personal career growth, and not only publish. Another key factor that comes into your assessment as a researcher is the impact of your research on other researchers, which means the number of citations your publications get, which is basically assessed in the form of a better index, which is H index or I-10 index, where H index corresponds to number of publications which are cited by other authors all to the same number. For example, if H index is 24, that means that an author has published at least 24 research papers which have been cited at least 24 times by other authors, whereas I-10 index is the index where number of publications which have been cited at least 10 times. So if you are when you start to apply for jobs, you will see that a lot of job applications now ask for not of for your number of publications, but also for your H index and I-10 index. So it is not only important to publish, but it is also important that others in the community also recognize your work, and that tells the impact or influence of your work on the community. But in spite of the fact that publications play such an important role in our careers and to the reputation of the institute, university, or nation, according to the facts that less than 50% of the scientific manuscript, the abstracts which are presented in conferences, actually go up to full-fledged published manuscripts. And the reason for that could be several. It could be lack of time, it could be that the study could never be completed because of certain reasons, or you got negative results because usually people avoid publishing negative results, and some of the journals are not even very friendly towards taking negative results to publish. But one of the major factors is, especially in the countries where English is not our native language, the lack of necessary proficiency in English and the training to write manuscript is a major factor for not being able to publish a lot of work that we actually do in the laboratory. So that is how Biosetup is doing a very good job, and it's a very nice effort that they're bringing in here on this platform webinar, where we can learn at least a little bit about writing manuscripts. There are different forms of manuscripts that you write. There could be research articles, there are reviews, case reports, methodology, and so on. So today our focus would be mostly on research articles, how research articles are drafted. So I'll be focusing on 4 major factors. Mainly we'll be discussing how manuscripts are drafted, followed by proofreading, and then formatting, bibliography, and just a flavor of how to check for plagiarism. So these are the factors that we will be discussing during this next 1 hour and so. So first thing first, before even I start talking about how to start drafting your manuscript, the most important factor is to read the papers. Before you start writing, you should have read a certain number of papers in your own field and read high quality published papers. By saying high quality published papers, I don't mean that you have to read only nature or science papers, because when you are beginning your careers, most of the times you don't even understand those papers. So by high quality published papers means which are peer reviewed and are of international repute. You can take guidance of your supervisors or teachers to fish out some of the journals in your field, which you can go through. So start with reading. Before you even think of writing the manuscript, start with reading papers in your field so that you get an idea how it is done. So to go into field, you must first see how the game is played. Now, these are the key components of a manuscript. For those who have read at least one manuscript so far would understand that this is the general structure of the manuscript, a research article, where you would have a title, abstract, introduction, methods, results, discussion, and finally your bibliography, which we also call as references. In some journals, results and discussions are combined together as one section called results and discussion. And in some journals, they also ask you to write keywords and conclusions for the manuscript, which are depending upon the format the journal accepts. Now, another important factor is that you have illustrations in the form of figures and tables, which is pictorial form of your data. So we will discuss all these components one by one. So first of all, coming to the title, what is the title of the manuscript? The title is nothing but a one sentence, a very simple short description of the study or the method that you have used. It could just actually represent just the main result of the paper. So whatever is the main finding of the paper, that is usually given as the title of the manuscript. These are just some of the examples how manuscript titles are written. So you see this first title, Polyploidy and Genomic Introgressions Facilitate Climate Adaptation and Biomass Yield in Switchgrass. This is just one sentence that describes the major conclusion of the study, which is used now here as a title. Sometimes you do not have one major conclusion, then you can provide more descriptive titles, which is the example which is shown here as number 2, a genome-wide survey of switchgrass genome structure and organization. Now here we do not know what is the major finding, but we know what has been done in this study. So the title would either describe in a one sentence what you have done, or it will describe the main finding of the paper in just one crisp sentence. It may or may not be a complete sentence. So this is also one of the way you give title, like cecal volvulus, a rare partum complication. This is not a complete sentence, but just describes what is being discussed in this manuscript. Now, there are a few things that you have to make sure while writing the title of the manuscript, that the titles never contain abbreviations or special characters and references. If you have a special character that must go, you should spell it out. So for example, if it is alpha, you don't use the symbol of alpha in title, you write ALPHA, the whole word. And abbreviations, the ones which are like well known, for example, DNA, RNA, those you can use, but otherwise we should avoid abbreviations. And titles, usually the good titles would have a keyword in the beginning or at the end of the title. Why it is important? Because that helps in the title to appear in the search engines when someone looks for a particular keyword to identify the manuscripts related to their work. So if there are keywords which are just in the beginning or at the end of the title, the search engines find it easier to search it and bring it up. Now, the title should be concise and very specific. So here I'll just give you one example of one of the title from my manuscript only: Agrobacterium mediated transient transformation of sorghum leaves for accelerating functional genomics and genome editing studies. Here we have mentioned what we have done and why we have done. Both the things are mentioned in one sentence in the title. Now, if you want to make it concise or specific, you can actually get rid of agrobacterium mediated, you can get rid of leaves or the rest part. So it could also be transient transformation of sorghum. Now it is concise, smaller, but it is not specific because there are various ways the transient transformation can be done. Agrobacterium mediated is one of that. You can be doing any tissue. Leaves is the one that we actually did. And by putting why we have done it, we are making sure that the people who are working in the area of functional genomics or genome editing will be able to find this paper when they search using those words, so that they can use our methods for those purposes. So you have to keep those things in mind when you actually give a title to a manuscript, and that defines the good title, where you would have the specific information in the most concise manner. Now, next we come to abstract. You can look at the abstract as more of description of the title itself, but now it is a longer description. You can take liberty with the words. You can describe it in 100 to 300 words. So this is just an example of one abstract that I have taken from one of the published manuscripts from Science. And as you can see, the abstract would also have made of 3 different components. The first component is the first 1 or 2 sentences, which are from the introduction of the let me just use the laser pointer. Yeah, the first few sentences would be the introduction of the manuscript. Then you will be describing the major findings in the major part of the abstract, and the last 1 or 2 sentences, the max, would actually describe the major conclusion or finding of the abstract. So this is usually the structure that you would follow while writing abstract, that you will first introduce the motivation behind the study or the topic in general, the importance of the work in 1 line. Then you will discuss all the findings that you have found so far, so the result part. And finally, you will conclude your abstract by a concluding sentence, which we call as the last sentence or conclusion statement of the abstract. Now, you make sure that you do not copy and paste the exact text from introduction, methods, and conclusion, because I said whatever you are going to put in introduction, similar sentences you will also have in your introduction of the manuscript. The results that you describe here will be described in the results section, and conclusions can be part of the discussion. So these are the things that would be there expanded in the whole manuscript. But when you are writing abstract, this is one mistake that students do. They'll just take one sentence from introduction, few sentences from research, and results, and 1 from conclusion to make a final abstract, which looks like a patchwork. So that is not what you should do. You should write it as a separate section, a concise abstract, by writing the same thing in your own words, trying to identify the most important introductory sentence, key results, and 1 concluding statement, which is really coming out of your results. Coming to now the next section, which is introduction. Now, introduction is the part where you describe why you are doing what you're doing. Here, it is important to describe the problem under investigation. So usually the first paragraph of introduction introduces the problem that you are trying to address. So what is the motivation of this study has to be described by, first of all, generally introducing the topic or concept. And here you only focus on the most important issues which are relevant to the work that you are doing. There could be many other aspects of the same problem, but you will only focus on the ones which are important and relevant to your study. Finally, you summarize the relevant research which has been done so far, and what is the gap that you are trying to fill. So if, for example, this is what is known so far, this group has done this and this, but this is something which is still lacking, which we are trying to do here. So you here provide a statement that why you are doing this study, what is the gap which is there, and finally you state your contribution in the last paragraph of the introduction, where you would say that this is the experiment we are performing, or this is the hypothesis that we have made that we are testing in this manuscript. So finally, your introduction would also have, in a way, 3 sections. The first, you introduce the problem, the concept, and then you introduce what is done so far, where the gap exists, and finally what you have done to fill up that gap. And make sure that introduction should not include everything which is done in the field. It should only include the relevant research, which means the research which is directly relevant to your topic. So it does not have to be the complete history of the topic. So do not write very long introductions. It should be very, very relevant, and make sure that it justifies your research question. And then we come to methods, where we describe how you have done whatever you have done so far in this manuscript. Now, methods usually are described in chronological order, which means that in order in which you have done. For example, if you have done, let's say, a transcriptomic study, you would first do sampling, extraction of the samples, or maybe growing the plants first, then extraction of samples, then RNA extractions, then sequencing, then analysis. So you have to put the methods in the same order in which you did the experiment. So methods are always written in chronological order. Methods should clearly specify everything which is crucial to reproduce the experiment. So methods are not protocols where you do not have to write step by step everything that you did, because many methods are standard and people know how to isolate DNA, how to run a particular software. But if there is something that you have changed which is crucial for reproducing the experiment, that detail has to be there in the methods. In methods, you only describe the details if they are new. As I said, there are some methods which are standard. Even if it is not standard, somebody has published that method or used that method in another paper, you can just briefly describe what you did, but you can provide the relevant reference for details, so that you can avoid providing unnecessary details, so the readers can go to the original reference where this method was first time described in detail. And here in methods, it is very important to give exact measurements, because they are crucial for reproducibility of the experiment. If you have used a certain temperature or certain concentration or time, it is important that you give the exact measurements in the methods. Coming to the results section. So this is a section where you actually describe what was the observation. So here there are no interpretations so far. What did you observe? You did an experiment, how you did it, and now what did you see? So results, basically, this order does not have to be same as the methods order. So in methods, we described everything in the order in which we did the experiments. But here in results, the order has to be in the way so that it flows with like a rational story. So what usually we do is we take all the figures or data points or data tables which are relevant to the study. We then order them in a way to see how you can tell the story so that it is easily understandable. And in that order, you start writing your results from the first observation that you made in your experiment, which is relevant to tell your story. Then obviously, if you are using figures and tables, they should be cited properly. So whenever you are describing a certain data point, and if it is illustrated in the form of a figure in the manuscript, that figure should be cited properly wherever you are discussing that text, so the reader should know that the data that you are describing is actually represented in this figure. Usually in results section, we do not give any references. Very rarely, if you are just following up a previous study or you have taken data from a previous study, you might have 1 or 2 references, but usually in result sections, we do not add any references to previous studies, and we do not include any interpretations, except for the fact that if you are writing a combined results and discussion section, results would usually never have interpretations. Now, the figures that you make is the pictorial or graphical illustration. So these usually have to be made before you start writing your results part. And this is the most aesthetically appealing part, because this is what you actually use colors and illustrations, and you show your data in an appealing manner here. Rest is all text. So most of the people may not even read the text. They read title, abstract, and they directly go to figures to understand what you are trying to show. So this is really important to have good quality figures. So you have to make sure that you are using the appropriate formats which do not compromise the quality of your figure and the resolution of the figure. Usually the required resolution is provided, the information about that is provided in instructions for author sections and the journals that you can check. But usually 3 dpi is what is standard, higher the better. When you are making graphs, it is important to use appropriate graphs. You may like certain form of representations. For example, if you have a time series experiment, the bar graph is not the best way to represent a time series data. You must show a line graph. right? So it is very important to understand which type of graphs or illustrations are used for which type of data, and use appropriate statistical analysis before you actually start representing that data in pictorial form. So using right type of graphs and doing statistical analysis is really important to make those figures useful. So because although I said that these are the most aesthetically appealing part of your manuscript, but these are not artwork, this is science. So you have to make sure that along with aesthetic appeal, they are statistically correct also. You can use various colors to differentiate different parts or the data points, but use them wisely and uniformly. So do not use very high pitch colors and different colors for different figures. So it looks nice if your figures have mild colors, and I would not use colors if it is not required, because most of the students would not take a colored printout to read your paper if they are going to take a printout. So if you are using colors where it is not required, most of the times it becomes difficult to differentiate those colors when you have a black and white printout. So take colors only if it is required, and then use the colors which can be differentiated when you take a black and white printer or grayscale print. If you have bigger data sets, then they usually go in the supplementary figures or tables. Rest, everything which is important to support the major conclusion of your manuscript, that has to go as the main figures or tables as part of the manuscript. Figures are always accompanied by a brief description, which we call as figure legends. So when you make figures, you're also supposed to provide a brief figure legend, which is long enough to understand the figure without reading the text. So it should describe what your figure is showing. So although in text you are going to describe what is presented in the figure, but the person who is reading your manuscript should not have to go to text or result section to be able to understand what is shown in your figure. So the figure legends should be enough to be able to understand whatever you are trying to show, the data you are trying to show in the figures. Any symbols you use, any abbreviations, any colors which designate some data points should be clearly specified and clarified in the figure legend. And mostly the figure legends are written in the present sense. The tables would have legends on the top, whereas figures they appear on the bottom. But when you submit your manuscript, you just submit as part of the manuscript. And supplementary figures and tables also, by the way, should have properly written legends. So I've put one example of a figure legend to show you how they are written. So you write a figure number. All figures and tables in a manuscript have to be numbered. So you write the figure number and the brief description. For example, staging of sorghum anther. So it does not have to be even a complete sentence. So whatever your figure is describing in nutshell, that description comes as the first part of the figure legend, and then you describe what every picture in that figure shows in a slightly a few more sentences that follow the main title figure legend. Now, coming to discussion. Discussion is the part where you do the critical analysis of the observations that you have made so far, and finally you reach to a conclusion, which, as I said, could be the title of your manuscript. So whatever is your final conclusion from the observation, that has to be analyzed and discussed. So that comes in discussion section. So this is the interpretation of all the results. This section should be kept short and crisp, but you should not forget to include all possible interpretations. So for example, if one interpretation goes with your hypothesis, that does not mean that you can neglect other possibilities. So the good discussions are the ones where you interpret your results if they support your hypothesis, but you also consider what are the other alternate interpretations possible from the data. Usually, discussions also involve comparison of your data with other published studies. Is it in agreement with what other people have seen in other systems, or it is something that you found something very different from what is published before? And discussion is not same as defense. So even if you find something different from what others have published, you do not have to really defend and try to hide those data points which do not agree with previous findings. So it is important that you discuss everything which is observed, even if it agrees or does not agree with the previous findings. Now, this discussion can also describe, which is good thing to add, how this work advances the field from the present state of knowledge, which is the selling point of your manuscript, that why someone should care about your paper. And good idea to put in the last paragraph the future perspectives or experiments that a person can do to clarify anything which could not be clarified so far. So any limitations of the study or any follow-up studies can be suggested as part of discussion only. But make sure that you do not make any statements which are beyond what the results are supporting. So there should not be any statements or any opinions which are not supported by your results. You may be thinking many things or many interpretations, but if they are not supported by what you have observed, then they do not have a place in discussion. And try to avoid the statements which exaggerate the impact of your study. For example, our study opens new avenues for this field, or it would be an excellent resource for doing this, or this is a foundation for this. I mean, if it is, then by all means, please put these statements. But usually we should not exaggerate what you have found. So the reviewers and editors and readers would know what is the impact of your study. You do not have to add these exaggerated statements. Now, when you start writing your manuscript, the first question that students ask is that where to start. So, and most of the students try to start in the same order, the way I discussed, in which it is printed, introduction, and then methods, and then results, and so on. But usually the best and easiest way, which is considered to write the manuscript, is to start with figures and tables. So when you have figures and tables ready, that also means that you have enough data to write the manuscript. So when you may put all the figures and tables together, then you look at them whether they are making the whole story and confirming the hypothesis that you are trying to test or not. And if they are, then you know that you are now ready to start writing the manuscript. So figures and tables are the first one, and results is nothing but describing those figures and results, figures and tables in the words. So it would be easiest to write results first if your figures and tables are ready. So first thing, make your figures and tables, arrange them in the order in which it is best to tell your story, and then start writing the description one by one, which would be your results section. And since now you've already done this, it is easiest to write the methods, how you did it, and it may or may not be, as I said, in the same order as you have results. And finally, you've got all the results. You can discuss them by going through the literature and what other people have done, and vis-a-vis what you have found and what is your major conclusion. And introduction can be written after that. Some people like to write introduction in the beginning, but many times the focus of the introduction slightly changes after you have drafted your results and discussion. So the finalizing introduction usually happens after you have written results and discussion parts. And then after that, you can start adding all the references and formatting the bibliography. And then we write the keywords, and what we write in the end is usually abstract and title. This is the most important part, and we cannot finalize it unless we have completely understood the whole story and we know for sure that what exactly we are trying to put across. So abstract and title are usually written at the end of the manuscript. And these are also important because your title, your keywords, and abstract are the ones which are searched by mostly search engines to display the results when someone searches for a particular manuscript. And this is the section which is mostly available to readers, because you see many journals are subscription only, and there many people may not even have access to your manuscript. So whether they want to read, or is it worth to try to get access to your manuscript, or whether I should cite this manuscript or not, depends on mostly on what readers get from your title or keywords or abstract. So these are the most important components of the manuscript, and you should write them at the end and invest a lot of time and effort in finalizing these sections of your manuscript. Now, one very important point that I want to discuss with you is that a good manuscript should be easy reading and easy understanding and simple language. Now, I want you to read this sentence once again. A good manuscript should be easy reading and easy understanding and simple language. I'm sure most of you would have noticed the spelling mistake in the heading itself and within this sentence also. And most of you would also have figured out that this is not the right way of framing the sentence. This sentence is grammatically wrong. So the way you have noticed and you were maybe slightly annoyed by this spelling mistake and the sentence framing, the same happens to reviewers when they read your manuscript, which is full of, grammatical or spelling errors. So which brings me to the next part, which is language proficiency, because your language proficiency directly impacts the readability of your manuscript. And the most common reason for rejection of a paper usually is poor readability. So readability of a paper, it has to be novel, it should be robust, it should be reproducible. All those factors are important for doing good science. But for your paper to be cited, the good readability is a very, very important factor, not only for the readers, but also for the reviewers and editors who are going to accept or reject your manuscript before it goes actually to your actual audience. And the reasons for the poor readability, why would a manuscript be poor readable? Those factors can range from some of the major issues, which is the lack of structure in the manuscript, to bad writing style, such as the choice of sentences, form of voice, or vocabulary that you have used, and finally the spelling or grammatical errors. So the structure we cannot discuss in this short period of time, but I'm going to discuss a few points about the writing style, which I mentioned here, and how to fix those. So first of all, when it comes to choice of tense, the rule of thumb is that the title should be usually written in the present tense. So these are general guidelines which are mostly followed by most of the researchers. You may have certain exceptions, and does not mean that if someone has written a title in the past tense and it makes it wrong. But this is what, if you just follow, if you're not sure which tense to use, these are the general guidelines, as I said, you can follow, where mostly titles are written in the present tense, and the title does not have to be a complete sentence. The introduction usually is a mix of two tenses, present and past. The present tense is the things which are widely known in your community. For example, if I say rice is the most important food crop in the world, this does not need a reference. This is a fact which is known to everyone. So I'm writing it in a present tense. Now, if I say that rice was shown to be the most important staple crop, that means I'm referring to a particular study which I am citing here in the introduction. So in that case, I have to write it in the past tense. So whenever you are referring to past or previous studies in the introduction, you use past tense. But when you write about the facts which are generally known, then we use present tense. So introduction is usually a mix of present and past tense. The methods are exclusively written in past tense because this is something that you have already done. That is why you are now writing the manuscript. So methods are written in past tense. Results are also written in the past tense mostly. And discussion is again the mix of present and past tense. So again, present tense for what is true and what is known or what you have found, and the past tenses if you what you have found in your study or what was found in previous studies when you are comparing. So again, you will have to make a decision between past and present tense, and if you are finally giving any future prospects, then that will be in the future tense, of course. Now, there is a choice of voice that also impacts the readability a lot of your manuscript. So we have passive voice and we have active voice that we use when we frame sentences, and the rule of thumb again is that use active voice whenever possible. So I'm just giving you two examples of a passive and an active sentence. The passive sentences, it was shown that mouse models do not work. Active voice is mouse models do not work. Similarly, the expression of gene X was induced by drug A. Drug A induces expression of gene X. You yourself can see the difference that when you use active voice, it is very direct and concise. You see the number of words has reduced when we are using active voice versus passive voice. So it decreases the wordiness of your manuscript and it makes your statements direct and clear and easy to understand. Methods is one exception where we mostly use passive voice. So for rest of the sections, we prefer to use active voice, but methods is one section where we do not have choice because otherwise you will have to use a lot of I and view, the first person. For example, when I say sequences were aligned, if I want to write it in active voice, I will have to say we aligned the sequences. So you cannot keep saying we added this, we added that, we grew plants, which does not again looks nice to read. So in methods we usually write in passive voice. if it is not avoidable. But other sections we try to write in active voice. Spelling and grammar mistakes are big put off for me also personally whenever I'm reviewing a manuscript. And especially because here you do not even need language proficiency. Even if you are writing manuscript using Word, there is an option to check for spelling and grammar in Word itself. So you just have to make sure that this do not check spelling and grammar is not checked on your Word file. If it is not checked, then automatically when you are writing or typing in the Word, it will underline the sections of the sentences where there are grammatical or spelling mistakes. So it would be nice that before you actually go ahead, you proofread your manuscript for all grammatical and spelling mistakes. There could be at times where the word is showing a grammatical or spelling mistake because you are using a specific scientific terminology, but most of the times if there is an error, you can easily fix it. So please cross-check for spelling and grammatical mistakes before you go ahead and submit your manuscript. Finally, when you have already prepared your manuscript, you have to add references in a particular format. So I've just shown you two different formats where you can use numbered formats or you can actually use the names of the authors with the year. And the choice depends on the journal where you are submitting your manuscript. And adding those references at a time was a manual and daunting task, but nowadays we have a lot of reference management tools available. Some of them are commercial, some of them are free. Mendeley is free, so depending upon the access you have to which reference management software, you can use these to add references and you can manage them. And the style of references, as I said, would depend on the journal guidelines where you want to submit it. We cannot use a different style. And usually these journals on their website provides those styles also, which are downloadable and can be imported in one of these softwares to format your references. And make sure that you only provide the relevant references and not just keep adding references. Having too many references is not at all impressive if they are not relevant. So sometimes students put a lot of references because they think that it makes look like you have read a lot of papers and then only you have make. But if they are not relevant, then it does not make any sense. And when you are reading papers, a lot of students prefer to read reviews over papers because then you can actually study a lot of papers in just concise form on one review, so which makes sense. But when you are actually citing some of the work that even if you have read from a review, it's good idea to actually cite the original study instead of the review, so that the credit is given to the original authors who have done the experiment initially. And one thing that I would like all of you to remember is that no matter which software you are using, whether it is commercial or free, it is always important that you cross-check your references manually because all these softwares are prone to errors. So cross-check and make sure that there is no messed up, because if you have used a wrong reference at a wrong place, that's a big put-off, and that is a very careless mistake on your part. So it is important to refer other researchers in the right manner and at appropriate place. And finally, I could not finish this by not talking about ethics, because many times our self-interest dominates over ethics, which should never ever happen. So please stay away from data fabrication. It is important to publish manuscript, but not at the cost of your ethics. So stay away from data fabrication, misuse of statistics, any type of image manipulation. Nowadays, there are softwares which can test any type of manipulation that you have done automatically. So and the punishment is very severe for getting indulged into all these practices. And do not include any false citations, and the authorship and all has to be done in a fair manner after discussion with your supervisor. And one component that I would discuss among all these is plagiarism, because that is now becoming a global issue. Plagiarism is an act of fraud. It involves stealing the information from other people's work and then lying about it or presenting it as your own work. And that's becoming a major issue, that many people would just take information from the published literature and try to put it as their own work, which is not fair, which is unethical. And there are different types of plagiarism. It does not only mean copying the whole thing. So some people assume that if I'm copying everything from a particular source, then only it is counted as plagiarism? No, plagiarism is of different types, as I said. Even if you are taking few lines from here, few lines from there, and then joining them all together, that is also plagiarism. That's called the patchwork. And even if you are paraphrasing, that means rewriting whatever you have read for other papers, if you are not citing the source from where you have read and now rewritten, then it is also plagiarism. So paraphrasing is something that we usually do. We read other people's paper and then we discuss it in our manuscripts in introduction section or discussion section, but the relevant source have to be cited. If the relevant source is missing, then basically you are again guilty of plagiarism. That is why checking references is so important again, because if you are not able to, so citing wrong references is one problem, but not citing the reference which should be cited is another problem, where you can be guilty of plagiarism if you have not cited the source from where you have taken the information. And even if you have published one study, one work, you cannot use the same language for another manuscript. That is also counted as self-plagiarism. Even if it is your PhD thesis, you should not copy your own work or recycle your own work for another publication, because that also comes under the scanner of self-plagiarism. And you can check the guidelines of UGC, university, or journal, especially for your thesis submissions. Your university may have different guidelines, but UGC also keeps updating its guidelines on plagiarism, that how many words and how much percentage of similarity is allowed. And there are several softwares. This is one common software, Turnitin, which is used by a lot of in academic institutes to check for plagiarism. But some students usually get fall prey of the freely available tools for plagiarism checks. So I wanted to make sure to put it across that please do not submit your work to the freely online tools without confirming their authenticity, because many of them are there just to steal your work. So use only authentic tools to check for plagiarism. Otherwise, once you have put in, you never know, it might be getting published in some predatory journal by someone in other corner of the world. So do not submit your work on any online platform for checking plagiarism and all. Only use authentic sources and with information and consent of your supervisors. And before you submit your manuscript, of course, it is important to acknowledge the funding agencies and supporters who have given you the funds for doing the experiments, your advisors who have helped in critically reading the manuscripts or giving you advice to improve the quality of the manuscript. And if you have used any facility, it is important to acknowledge that also. Nowadays, the funding agencies also keep a check that you have acknowledged them for the work that you have done with the money that was provided. And so it is anyway important that you should give the credit where it is due. And once you're done with the writing and drafting of your manuscript, now you would like to format it for the journal where you want to submit. Now, journal choice again depends on your field and the scope of the journal. So the best thing to do is to scan all the journals in which the related studies are published, read their scope, and also sometimes it becomes very crucial to see if they are open access or subscription only, because if they are open access, there would be a publication fees associated with it. So whether you are in a position to pay the publication fees or not also matters. You can always apply for waivers, but that also depends. You may or may not be granted waiver, and the percentage of waiver may also apply. So those are the factors that would impact your choice of journal. The impact factor and reputation of the journal also is very important when you choose a journal for your manuscript. So you format your manuscript for the journal and you submit it. And if it gets rejected, you usually would get reviewers' comments, which will help you to revise by adding certain experiments, and again format it and submit either to the same journal or you can submit to another journal. So never get disappointed by a rejection. Many times submitting a paper is a way to find out what other peers think about your work and what is the thing that you are missing in your experiment. Sometimes you feel that my story is complete, but when you submit it, the reviewers point out certain things which are missing, and that helps significantly improve the quality of your manuscript. So rejection is in a way opportunity to improve the quality of your manuscript. Do not see it as a failure. If it gets accepted, well and good, congratulations. But if it gets rejected, it's a very normal process. Almost every researcher goes through this process. No researcher would have every manuscript that they submit accepted in one go. So be prepared for that also. And once your manuscript is accepted, it is also nowadays important that you put it out in social media or you talk about in conferences and your peers, so that you get the visibility of your work. Because as I said in the beginning, your citations are also important factor to determine the impact of your study. And now if I have to cite, let's say some papers, and there are 10 papers out there, I haven't come across your paper, I may not even know that you have done such an interesting work if I haven't done the search very thoroughly. So sometimes sharing your work with the peers, telling them what you are doing, especially the ones who are doing similar studies, also helps to be recognized, and so that they can, based on your credibility, they can cite your work. And I think with that, I'll end the presentation and wish you all the best, and happy to take all the questions that you might have. I hope there are some questions now. We have half an hour for taking questions.
Dear participants, if you have any doubt, you can post the questions in the chat box. Please do not unmute yourself. Please post your questions in the chat box.
I think whether the PPT would be available, I think the recording of the talk would be available. The organizers can answer that question better.
Yeah, ma'am, after this session, we will be providing with the link, YouTube link, so that they can view this video, complete entire session. They'll get the recording.
Yeah, one question is about ethical approval. So if you are working with animal models, cell lines, or transgenics, then you definitely need ethical approvals. There are several boards for getting those ethical approvals, but they are not usually taken individually. They are taken through your institute. So I would request you to contact the person in charge in your institute to inquire about the process.
Dear participants, please post the questions in everyone. Go to everyone and then post the questions. Elizabeth, you can post your question again.
Yeah, so one question is, what is conflict of interest? So if in case you have a conflict of interest, means that whatever you are publishing is a sponsored research, then that has to be specified. So if you had an industry who sponsored your research, or any monetary benefit which is involved in the presentation of the results, that has to be clarified. For example, if there is a product that a company wants to introduce as something which has very high iron content compared to another brand, and they approach me to do that study and then publish my findings where I show that their product is better than the product of company B. Now, in this case, there is a vested interest involved of mine as their consultant, as well as the company's interest involved. So that has to be clarified, that this research was sponsored by a company. Most of the times when we are doing academic research, which is funded through the government funding agencies, then there is no conflict of interest. But if it is sponsored, then it has to be specified. How to check if a journal is predatory? So this usually this UGC has actually on their website provided a list of journals which are approved by UGC. So if your journal is in that list, then you know that it is not a predatory journal. So I think that is the easiest way to check the authenticity of your journal, that you go to the UGC care list and you check whether the journal is there in that list or not. And if it is there, then you are safe. What are the preliminary steps to writing a review article? So that's altogether a different topic, but since we have time, maybe I can just give you a little bit of insight about that. So review article writing is slightly different, because here you are not going to have your figures and tables and data ready first. So here you have actually gone through literature and you are trying to put it all in a succinct form in one place in the form of a review article. So what would be the approach? How would you start? Usually the reviews are written by the experts who already would have good or ample amount of knowledge, and they would want to put it across to the younger researchers. But nowadays, it is also becoming a user practice for younger researchers to read and start reviewing, which is also a good practice in a way that you are able to now understand what is done in your field and put it all together in one form, so that this is a era where people do not want to read 20 papers. So if you can get away by reading a one good review article which has reviewed 20 papers, it saves a lot of time for others also. But it should always have some sort of your input also, not just the combination of the different research papers that you have read. So how you start is that, first of all, you collect the relevant literature to the topic that you have chosen. Then you start reading those papers one by one. And then when you read those papers, it's a good idea to put a note or a paragraph in a Word file from what were the main findings of that paper. So in a way, if you have read, let's say, 50 papers, you would have 50 paragraphs. When you're writing a review article, you usually read that many papers. So 20 to 50 papers you have read. Every paper you read, then you write a small paragraph about what you studied in that, because you are not going to remember at the end of 50 papers what you read in what paper. And with every paragraph, you cite where you have read it. Now you have 50 papers, all concised in the form of 50 small paragraphs, right? Once you have read all the papers and describe one by one every time you read a paper in the form of a paragraph, now you come back to your Word file where you have 50 paragraphs, and now you read this 2 times, 3 times, 4 times to understand what is that has been done, what are the studies which are similar, what are the studies which are dissimilar, how can I put this information, organize in this information into separate bins or classify. And then based on that, you will now be putting these paragraphs into different headings. For example, if I am writing a review article on stress and I have read 50 papers, now 10 of them are related to abiotic stress, 10 are related to biotic stress, and 10 are related to general the high throughput experiments, which talk about both in a way or crosstalk of them. Now I divided those paragraphs into 3 different bins. So now I have organized whatever I had in a Word file into 3 sections. Now work on one section at a time. This abiotic can further be divided into different factors if they are talking about different points. Again, reorganize it. And then now try to write all those paragraphs related to one subheader as one story, what you understood. What is the main theme, what is coming, whether it is in chronological order in which the discoveries were made, or whether it is based on the classification that you could do after reading it. And for each section, now you would have one write-up. From paragraphs, now you have come to sort of bigger essays where it is one topic covered under one heading. And then you look at that one to see how the structure. So now at this point, you decide the title of your review, the structure of your review. And now you are trying to describe the whole review. And this is the point where now you will go back again to those papers to make sure that you have not missed an important point. Because when you are reading for the first time, you may not always know what is the most critical finding that you should note down in the form of paragraph. You have noted down a few things, maybe similar to what abstract looks like. And now you have everything again going back to those papers and seeing you have not missed anything, putting it all together finally. And then you can, it's a good idea to discuss with your peers or with your colleagues to see what is the points which are coming up from overall study. So what are the conclusions, or which direction this research is going? Those you can put as across as your intellectual contribution. Or what is the gap which is missing? Somebody has done this and this, but this is not done. So this story is not getting completed without this. So you can identify the gaps in the research. So there has to be not just the combination, putting all together all the studies which have been done so far, but also some intellectual contribution which would come from you after you have studied all those papers and put them all together in the form of review. I hope I could briefly describe. What does state of art mean? State of art in research means that you are using contemporary technologies. For example, if I'm doing an experiment now, I would use a technology which is modern technology available now. If I use a technology which is already obsolete, then many times it is very challenging to publish that work, because The current technologies, the state-of-art technologies are more advanced and can give you better resolution of the data and better quality of data and better insights. So it is important that you use the recent technology. So whenever you are writing your funding grants or you are starting your projects, make sure that you know that what is the state-of-art technology in that area, so that you use the most advanced technology and not work on something which is already obsolete, whose limitations are already known. And so you will be answering the same questions why you have chosen this particular technique when your manuscript goes for reviewing. Okay, I'll try to answer a few more questions. How to choose suitable journal for your work. So this, again, I've already discussed that it again depends on the kind of work you are doing. The easiest way is to find out which journals have already published the kind of work that you are doing. So for example, if you are working on functional characterization of a gene in a particular species, find out that similar type of work is done in which journals. That is the easiest way. Second possibility is that you can actually look for journals which are of international repute in your field and read their scope, whether the work you are doing is in the scope of the journal or not. If you are still not clear, you can actually send a pre-submission query to the editor that this is the work we are doing. Is your journal the right fit for this? And they usually reply. They are kind enough to reply that whether this work will fit. So usually if you give the title and a small abstract or summary of the work before submitting to journal, they will usually get back and tell you whether it is in the scope of the journal or not. And that saves a lot of time, because many times if you submit to a wrong journal and the editor does not pay attention and send it for reviewing, and reviewers finally say that this is not in the scope of the journal, it wastes sometimes a month or so in just deciding the right journal. Writing research proposal tips, I think we can do another presentation for writing the research proposal, because that's again a complete topic. I won't be able to do justice with that if I just discuss in a few minutes. So we can see if there is a lot of interest, we can do another presentation on writing grant proposals. What if my hypothesis is not matching the experiment result, but it is close? Should I go for publishing? What if my hypothesis is not matching the experimental result? Yes, of course, you should go ahead and publish. Your hypothesis is the first thought that came to your mind, that this possibly can be explained by this way. But there are endless possibilities. So your hypothesis, whatever you make initially, may not match with what you find out. And there is no reason that you should not publish if it is not matching with your earlier hypothesis. You should by all means publish it. And if you think that this is not making sense, rather than deciding it by yourself, I would say just submit it and let reviewers tell you if it does not make sense, or you need to do additional experiments to confirm that what you are suggesting, if it is not matching to hypothesis, then what are the other experiments you probably need to do to verify that. Would it be fine to write a research article in post-graduation during project of 1 month? See, usually 1 month of work is not enough for writing a publication. You need more investment of time. So just writing a sloppy manuscript would not take you anywhere. So if you are writing manuscript, I would say that aim for good quality manuscripts, and that needs investment in terms of time also. So 1 month internship, you cannot write a manuscript, but if you have a 6-month dissertation, then of course, a lot of undergrad students have published papers, and some have published with me also. So if you have a 6 months of good quality work, then you can obviously go for publication. If we are checked online plagiarism software, it will be shows in next checked in journal publication. Okay, so the question is that when you put your manuscript for checking the plagiarism, if you are using, as I said, do not use freely available online tools. If you are using authentic one also, then if you have put in there your manuscript to check for plagiarism, next time when you put in, then it will show match to the earlier one that you have submitted. So there is a setting in these tools where you can actually uncheck the button that it should not be submitted to any repository, including the repository of that particular software. So if you check the settings where uncheck the settings where this is not submitted to any repository, then that's not a problem. Next time you check it, it will still do a fresh look and not show plagiarism based on the fact that you already checked it once. Does the rating of journals matter a lot? So rating of journals is for a reason, right? If a journal has high impact factor, then it really matters. It is important and it is read and is respected by the community. That is why the impact factor is higher. So yes, rating matters, impact factor matters. As far as the way we now assess researchers, impact factor matters. But then if you are talking about, so you see, even if you see the values, it does not always mean that a paper published in research impact factor 5 is better than research paper published in impact factor 3. So there is always a window where journals of, let's say, impact factor this to this. I do not want to put numbers because then that can become controversial. But there is always a range of journals which would have similar quality manuscript, and if your data is in that much the range, then it probably does not matter. So if your impact factor of the journal is 4 versus 4.5 or 5, then probably it does not matter too much. So do not rush behind this journal has 4, this is 4.5, I should publish in 4.5. That does not really matter that much. But yes, if the quality of your manuscript is really good, then go for a higher impact factor journal. But if you know that it is not very good, then you don't have a choice. But usually it is better to increase the quality of your manuscript first before publishing, rather than just publishing it in a very low impact journal, because that way your manuscript, if it is published in a reputed journal, the citations would also be more. Is there any other question that I have missed? Because now it is keeps bringing me down.
Yeah, ma'am, just a minute.
Yeah, I hope I'm trying to answer all the questions, but yeah, I would request all of you to not put the greetings, thank you ma'am, because otherwise I will skip the questions that students might have. So this is bringing me down to the chat window. So I appreciate your acknowledgement, and you do not have to individually say thank you, ma'am. If there are questions,
Ma'am,
please
one more
post them.
question. How to improve the quality of manuscript by Harsh.
So that is what we talked about, right? So the quality can mean many things when you ask this question. It could actually be means that the quality of the manuscript by doing experiments and making the results more conclusive, or the context in which we are talking here is to improve the readability of the manuscript. So I would not say that as quality of the manuscript, but the readability of the manuscript that can be improved by proofreading, choosing the right structure where the results are discussed in a logical order and explained clearly, and your language is chosen carefully, where you do not use too many words and the wrong sentences to describe what you have found. So using in right, short, concise sentences with minimal errors, and the right choice of words is all that matters. I think that mostly comes with experience. This cannot just be taught in one class. Once you start writing, this is a process. You will eventually understand how to improve the language. One way that I learned a lot of things was that if you send your manuscript to a professional to edit, and request them, either it's a professional or your supervisor or a person you know is good at editing, if you send them to edit your manuscript that you've already written, and request them to do it in track changes tool, so that you can track what they have done with your manuscript. And when it comes back, then you can actually look at what are the things that they have done to improve the quality of your manuscript, and those are the tips that you can note down for your future also. So the best way to teach is to do it for you, right? So if you see someone who has done editing on your manuscript using track changes tool, you can track those changes and apply them to your future manuscripts also.
Ma'am, next we have Jensen Samrat. What is the procedure for obtaining figures from other article for review article?
Yes, so usually we do not put exactly same figure from the previously published papers, but if you think that that is crucial to maintain and the point that you want to put across, the only way is that you directly write to authors and request for their permission. Many times the authors may not also have copyright, because many times when we publish papers, we give the copyrights to journals. So you might have to contact the journal as well. So I've never done that myself, but obviously it needs permission from the journal as well as the authors to take their paper. The easiest way is that if it is not crucial to put it as such, you can actually modify it to make it more clear. And then you say in your legend, adapted from, and then you put a right reference for that one.
Ma'am, next question is from Elizabeth. How is a cite factor useful, and what is more important, cite factor or impact factor?
I think I've already answered that question, that impact factors do matter when people assess the quality of your work when you apply for jobs and all. I personally do not believe that that is the most important factor, but as long as it is not a drastic difference. So if you say the impact factor, journal of impact factor, let's say 10 is not equivalent to journal of impact factor 2. But if it is within the range of 2 plus and minus 2 or 3, then it's probably does not make a huge difference. But as I said, fortunately or unfortunately, many of the people who are assessing you as a researcher would assess you based on the number of publications as well as impact factor of the journal. So at the end of the day, it does matter, at least for today, and the way we assess people, it does matter. If I want to publish a paper, should it be done with the consent of a supervisor, or I can do it on my own? Definitely it has to be done with the consent of your supervisor, because whatever experiments you have done, your supervisor must have conceived it and provided you suitable guidance and the facility to do the work. And it is unethical to publish a work without the consent of your supervisors. If he allows you to publish, he or she allows you to publish without being part of the paper as an author, that's a different story. You can go ahead, but the permission has to be taken. Ideally, the supervisors are the corresponding authors. You would be the first author if you are the main person who has done the work. But in any ways, whether the person wants to be author or not, or just want to be acknowledged in the acknowledgement section, the consent has to be taken. But if that is the case where your supervisor has not played a role into the manuscript, I think I would still talk to them and tell them that this is maybe a review article that I have written, which is totally my independent work that I have done in my free time, and I want to publish it, and it should be in their information. If they do not want to be part, if they have not contributed, then definitely they should not be willing to be part of the manuscript also. If mostly, I'm assuming this would be a review article, and in that case you can alone publish it. So you do not have to have an affiliation as a faculty member to an institute to be able to publish the manuscript, if that is the question. As a student, if we want to publish our research paper, any reliable source. So it does not really matter whether you are a student or a faculty member. These are the same journals that you send your manuscript, and it goes to the same peer review process and acceptance or rejection. The standards remain same, irrespective of whether you are a student or a faculty member. So you will, just like any other faculty member, submit it to a journal. Is it good to have one paper from a thesis or having different papers from different aspects of a thesis? Which one will be reliable? Okay, most of the times this decision is actually taken by your supervisors by considering certain factors. So I would not say that one is better over the other. There are circumstances where you want to publish the whole thesis as one good paper, if that is the goal, and your study is all going to the same conclusion, then obviously rather than slicing it into separate papers, it's better to put it as one story and publish it in a very good impact journal. But if those aspects are unrelated and just do not make sense to put them all together, then you may want to publish them as separate papers. There is the practice of splitting your story into smaller sections is called slicing and is not usually recommended. So unless the different chapters of your thesis correspond to different type of work, if they go and the conclusion, the major findings are same, they are supporting the same fact, then it's published as one single story in a good impact factor journal. But if they are independent chapters which are having in their independent conclusions, then you are going to publish them as separate papers. I know as a student for you the number of papers matter, but you have to see a balance between both, that publishing many papers of into small impact factor journals versus publishing one good paper in a high impact journal. So usually I wouldn't recommend one over the other, but personally I believe it is better to publish, if the story is going for one conclusion, publish it as one good paper in a high impact journal. How do you suggest reviewers while submitting? So reviewers are the people who are going to review your manuscript, and the ideal way would be that you actually look for people who are expert. If you are working in a field for a few years, you have been reading papers from other researchers and citing their work also, so you should already know who are the people who are working in exactly the same area and would be the best ones to review your paper. Now the way you look at it, based on that your choice varies, because some people look at choice of reviewers as that you are trying to choose people who will be reviewing your paper. So you try to choose people who are your friends or in your network somehow, or so that they are softer towards your manuscript and would accept it easily. But ideally you should be sending it to people who can actually assess the quality of your manuscript. So instead of sending it out to people whom you might have met in a conference or might be in your network, it is better to send it to people. It is possible that people who are in your network are also expert in the field, and there is no harm in sending to them for reviewing. But what I'm saying is that the decision has to be made by the fact that who are the people who would be actually be able to evaluate your manuscript without any bias, positive or negative. So even if your relations are not good with a particular scientist, then obviously you avoid. And some journals even ask if you want to avoid certain reviewers or not. So those personal biases, I think, should be avoided when you choose reviewers. So people who are experts in your field, because if you are going to choose unbiased reviewers, then sometimes, not many times, it actually helps you to improve the quality of your manuscript also. So the person is not having any personal obligation to accept your manuscript, so more chance that they would provide you a fair feedback that will eventually improve the quality of your manuscript, and you also as a researcher will grow. So rather than looking for a short-term gain where your acceptance of your manuscript might be important, the longer-term gain would be to be able to learn from the reviewers who can critically assess your manuscript. You mentioned that figure legends, that it should be enough to understand data. With that, do you mean it should also include observation or only conditions of experiment? No conditions of experiments and no observations. The conditions of experiments are described in the methods, and the observations are methods in results. What I meant was that the figure legend should describe what is being shown in the figure. So for example, if there is a bar chart, let's say a time series experiment, and you're checking the expression of a gene, so you say that this graph shows the expression of gene X under this condition. And then if you have like put error bars, what does that error bar represent, whether it is standard error or whether it is standard deviation. If there are more than one type of graph, two conditions, then, and you have used certain, like let's say in shoot and in root, so what does S represent, what does any abbreviations you have used, what do those represent? So basically describing what you are seeing. So in a way, like for example, when I'm showing you a picture, if I just keep moving through my presentation, which is full of pictures, some of you may interpret differently while others may interpret differently, right? But you want all your readers to interpret your graph the way you want them, the intention with which you have put it there. So it should be giving the information which is enough to understand the figure that is presented there, not the details of results or methods, of course. For that, the readers obviously will have to go to methods and results. So what is visible in your graph? That has to be clearly specified. And if there are any colors or things that you have used, abbreviations which are not obvious, then you should specify what do they actually mean. If you have used a scale bar, then what does scale bar mean? What is the length correspond to? Those kind of things. Can we send our article to more than one journal at the same time? No, you cannot. You can submit your article to a preprint server and then also in parallel submit it to a journal for review, but you cannot submit your paper to more than one journal at the same time. Preprint server also, you have to check that there are some journals which will allow you to submit your manuscript to preprint server for considering in the considering for the publication, while some journals do not allow. So sometimes when you are submitting it to preprint server, you also narrow down your choice of journals where you can now submit once you have put it onto preprint server. So, but yes, definitely you cannot submit the same paper to more than one journal. That's totally unethical. Can you submit the paper by your own, or it should always be done by the supervisor? If your supervisor is the corresponding author, then ideally they should submit. And if you are a seasoned researcher who knows how to submit, they can give their credentials to you to submit. But ideally, the corresponding author is the one who should submit the paper. Because you actually sometimes other authors can also submit on behalf. If you are a postdoc or you are a senior PhD student, you know how to submit, and then the corresponding author can rely on you for submission, and they can give you their account information to you to submit, but that is with their consent, of course. There is nothing like cite factor that I mentioned. I think Elizabeth is confused, because citation that I mentioned was that how many people actually refer to your paper in their paper. So if I have published a study, the number of citations is how many people have read my paper and actually cited my paper in their bibliography when they were writing the manuscript. So the citation is of a single manuscript, and impact factor is of the journal, right? So these are two different things. I hope there is no confusion. The reliable, freely available tools for plagiarism check, I'm sorry, I have no idea, because I have been using the license provided by my university only. I'm not aware if there is any reliable, freely available tool for plagiarism check. I would suggest you go to the library of the institute or university where you are working and check with them if they have any access to any commercial tool. If they have, they can provide you either through your supervisor or directly to you, or you can ask them if there is any recommendation. So usually libraries of the institute take that responsibility of suggesting the plagiarism tools, plagiarism checking tools. Is review paper included in H-index? Of course, all your publications. So review paper is also a publication. So whether it is a research article, database, anything, if it is the H index is calculated based on the total number of publications you have. It also includes book chapters, just to clarify. So yes, review papers, research articles, book chapters, all of them are cited and are included to calculate your H index.
So I hope there are no more questions. Last but not the least, I would request Arkadeep Das sir to propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Thank you. So, very good evening to one and all. And my heartfelt thanks to our eminent guest speaker, Dr. Rita Sharma. I thank you for accepting my invitation for the interactive talk webinar. So it was an interactive and research writing related talk from a great woman scientist, and you know, the topic of your collection is so useful for students and researchers, because nowadays scientific writing or manuscript writing or article writing is very important for all the students, those who are build their career in the scientific field. And you know, the way you share your knowledge regarding this topic was so impressive and attractive for the students and researchers, because this topic was so vast, ma'am. And I mean, in 1 hour talk you will give the insight awareness regarding this topic. It's in very concise way. It is a very big thing, ma'am. Literally I was enjoying it and learn a lot of things to boost up my knowledge, and I hope all are liking it too, because you know, the people are looking forward to learn how to write a good scientific manuscript in very concise and reliable manner. And so thank you for sparing your precious time and sharing your knowledge with us, and a big thank you for answering all the questions of all the body researchers and scientists. So it was a really great experience. So it's give me a immense pleasure to a vote of thanks to our eminent guest speaker, Dr. Rita Sharma, and also all the participants. Once again, I thank you, ma'am, for such an interactive, interesting, research-oriented talk. Your dedications and work in the field, not only the science, and you also betterment of scientific society, and you are so helpful in nature. It's really commendable and attractive, ma'am. So hats off to you, ma'am, as a woman researcher come scientist, and long journey of your research is so impressive, and I'm looking forward for your guidance in future too, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Arkadeep, for the very, very generous vote of thanks and introduction. I think it's as a researcher, for all of us, it's a moral responsibility for us as teachers also to keep doing these kind of things. And I'm happy to see the participation at your platform. So it is very impressive that a lot of students actually participated and asked very relevant questions. So it was indeed a pleasure for me to be part of your event. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
I'm looking forward for you, ma'am, definitely. And now, and my thanks to our organizer, event coordinators, Dr. Kavita Pal, Dr. Praveen Kumar, Dr. Muni Lakshmi, and our organizer, Ms. Sneha Mahajan, Ananya, Devasri Shreyans, and my dear students and researchers. Thank you for joining and invest your precious time for listening the talk and support us. And last but not the least, on the behalf of Biosetup Life Science, I thank each and every one for contribution to make this webinar a successful one. And I'm looking forward for arranging many such events to let people know about how progress made in science. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day ahead, and happy Navratri to all. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, Sebi. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Dear participants, I'll be sharing the feedback link. A humble request to all the participants to please fill the feedback form and then exit the session. Thank you.